Okay, welcome to using the square root property to solve quadratic equations. And this time we're going to actually have some complex solutions. And well, actually, I don't think we're going to have any imaginary, but we're going to have some irrational. So that's included in complex. So here we go. We're going to take a look at this first one. I want you to notice something about these equations. I want you to notice that x is in one spot. When x is in one location, then we can use the square root property. In other words, we can just go ahead and isolate that variable and take the square root of both sides. Let's take a look at what that means. That means this, that I'm going to go ahead and notice that x is in one location. Then I'm going to add the 25 to both sides, and I'm going to get my x squared term isolated. As soon as I do that, then I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. Now, you notice that before this I did not see a radical, but I'm placing the radical. I'm taking the square root. So when I take the square root of both sides, then I must put a plus or minus. I must use a plus or minus. Okay, so we're going to have now, we have x is equal to the plus or minus 5. Okay, so I have two answers that would actually work if I substituted them back into the x position. A negative 5 squared minus 25 is 0, but positive 5 squared minus 25 is also 0. All right, let's take a look at the second one. You notice again that the x term that is squared is actually all in one location. That just means I'm going to continue. I am still going to isolate that by just whittling away at everything else around it. There's a 1, so now I have 3x squared. Now I need to get rid of the 3, so I'm going to go ahead and divide by 3, and now I have x squared is equal to a third. At this point, I take the square root of both sides. Because I've taken the square root, I must insert a plus or minus. Now, the square root of 1 is 1, so, I can go ahead and clear off the top, but the square root of 3 at the bottom is going to stay a square root of 3. Now, you remember from probably your Algebra 2 class that it is not okay to leave a radical on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we call rationalizing. I'm going to multiply by radical 3 and another radical 3. Now, look at that. That's really just me multiplying by a funny form of a 1. You realize that's just me multiplying by 1. So it makes it legal to multiply anything by 1. And so here we go. We've got this. We've got radical 3 on top. And then radical 3 times radical 3 is radical 9. Okay, so that's radical 9. Well, radical 9 is 3. So there's my answer. There are my two answers, a positive radical 3 over 3 and a negative radical 3 over 3. Okay, so don't forget to rationalize. If we get a radical on the bottom, it's irrational, right, when we have a radical 3? So we're going to rationalize the denominator. So don't forget to rationalize the denominator. Let's take a look at a third example. Okay, so again, we have the x in one location, but here's what we have. We have it all grouped. We have it grouped together with a squared around it. So we're immediately ready, at this point, we're immediately ready to take the square root of both sides, right? Because I have basically the element that is being squared, I have it isolated. So I'm going to take the square root of the left and the square root of the right. The square root of something squared is just the radical, the inside of the radical coming out. What's the square root of 0? Well, that's just 0. Now I'm ready to solve my equation. Okay, and so then I'm going to get x is equal to 3/2. Now you notice this time I only got one answer, and the reason that I only got one answer is when I took the square root of the right, I didn't have a plus or minus 0, right? I could have put plus or minus, but there's no such thing as a plus or minus is 0. So this is why I only received one answer, okay, because there is no plus or minus 0. Okay, one last example. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and notice that the term that is being squared is right here. Okay, there's the x. It's written one place, but the squaring is taking, basically, we have that one thing squared. So I know that I am just going to continue to solve for that binomial. Here we go. We have x minus 5. So we get this alone. Now here's the problem. When I do this, when I take the square root of both sides, actually we do have an imaginary answer in this one, so it was true to say we have complex answers. So I have the left-hand side cleans up very nicely, but the right-hand side is really this. Please remember that the right-hand side really is just the square root of -1 times the square root of 7. Well, the square root of -1 is the imaginary realm, right? So we call that the letter I, if you remember from your last year's math class. And then the radical 7, I don't want to get a decimal. I want to leave it that way because I want the exact answer. And I don't want to forget to put the plus or minus. I should have done that at first because I have plus or minus on the right, right? Okay, so now I have this. I have plus 5 plus 5. I'm just getting the x alone. That was my goal, right, is to solve for x. So x is 5 plus or minus I square roots of 7. And that is, those are your answers. There are two answers, 5 plus I square roots of 7 and 5 minus I square roots of 7. That's what x is. Okay, hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.